Community Planning Group. We ask for any non-agenda public comment to be sent by email prior to the meeting. I have not received any. So we can proceed to Alex with the community plan update, schedule and tool results.
Thank you, Jeff. I have a brief presentation and we can have a discussion. Maybe 15 to 20 minutes is my presentation length. There is supplemental information that's available that if we wanted to discuss, we can. But we can get going in terms of schedule. So we're here today. Happy Monday, November 16th. Sharing online tool results. December, there is no meeting. And then in January, we'll begin the land use conversation. And I've held 3 months for this, January, February, March. So that's the kind of the near-term schedule.
Will those meetings be back to 5:30 or are we going to be doing them at 6?
I think with land use, we're probably 5:30, but we can discuss, Jeff, to figure out. I think we do want to leave plenty of time for discussion.
Yeah.
On that. So just to recap, this is the 20th meeting of the advisory committee or Mira Mesa Community Plan Update related meetings. We've had 5 events: open house, pop-up booth, and workshops, and online engagement and stakeholder interviews. We had our first survey in 2018, and stakeholder interviews, that's with a lot of the economic stakeholders, large businesses in 2019, and then now the online community engagement tool this fall. And just to share a little bit more about the process, this has been a very participatory scenario planning. If you remember, in the summer, we started with introduction to urban design. And in September, we brought initial concepts, and there was a very strong reaction. So we had a community dialogue in October, and we followed up with revisions and bringing more mobility improvements and transit first. So that's what we did in November. We also had an economic forum in October to hear from the business stakeholders. And then February, we came back with the employment center concepts and also mobility concepts in March. And in April, we came back with our shopping center concept revisions. And May was Miramar Gateway concepts that we shared. So that's all gone into the online community engagement tool. So it's been a constant community feedback loop. And just to recap, what is a community plan? So it is a public document which contains specific proposals for future land uses and public improvements. It's part of a general plan with tailored policies and long-range physical development guide, which you all know, but just wanted to recap and to highlight what the community plan does not do. So the plan itself does not mandate growth. Community plan provides options and opportunities for new housing and employment. Any new development would require property owners to redevelop or mandate. It is not a maintenance document. So community plan is a long-range policy and regulatory documents that identifies future infrastructure needs. So, paving Gold Coast Road or existing maintenance issues of parks, we would not cover that in the community plan. And it also does not approve specific projects. It establishes policies and regulatory directions. So all future projects will still go through an approval process. And what the community plan does do, it does provides community-specific tailored policies and a long-range physical development guide for city staff decision makers, property owners, and citizens engaged in community development plan with specific goals and policies to address land use mobility, urban design, parks, open space, and public facilities. And it is a component of city's general plan, so it is a long-term blueprint for the future. So that was just a recap, and let's get to the OCET results. So in terms of participation, it was fantastic. Thanks for sharing the link and encouraging people to take this survey. We had about 749 participants, and we conducted some data cleanup and IP outlier detection techniques, which led to removal of 53 users. One was a test, survey test one. And then we had an individual I call IP35, who took the survey 35 times, and then IP19 that took the survey 19 times. So it was very obvious. And the library was closed at that time. So we did some detection techniques and ended up adding the first survey for IP35 and IP19. So that dropped the total actual participants to 696 people, and we've had over 4,000 data points and almost 200 comments. In terms of who took the survey, you can see 54% said they live in Mira Mesa, 32% said they live and work in Mira Mesa, with 6% saying they come to work in Mira Mesa and 7% other. So overall, 86% said they live or live and work in Mira Mesa. So very strong community representation here. In terms of age, you can see about 11% of survey takers were less than younger than 25, and with 47% 26 to 40 years old, and then 33% 41 to 60, and then 9% older than 61. In terms of ethnicity and race, pretty good cross-section of people. 35% Asian or Pacific Islanders, Black 2%, Hispanic or Latino 6%, Native American. We had a couple of takers that said they were Native American, and then 52% white with 5% other ethnicities. So in terms of zip code, this was the only demographic question we required survey participants to take. So you can really see that 6% said they were from Sorrento Valley, and then 81% from Mira Mesa, with 4% saying they were from Rancho Penasquitos, and 2% from Scripps Ranch, and 1% for Black Mountain Ranch. So you have about 7% from the neighboring communities, and then 87% from Mira Mesa and Sorrento Valley, and 6% from other zip codes.
I just add one little thing, Alex, real quick.
Yeah.
So 92121 and 92126, Miramar is in both of those zip codes, just FYI to those.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. Yes, good point. So going to the scenario selections. So this is just a table that highlight all the selections for each of the focus areas and the sub areas. So we had 6 kind of focus area sub areas. So you can see overall 696 survey takers. And we'll just go into a brief highlight for each of the focus areas. So just to remind people, the focus area 1 was Mira Mesa Gateway, which is right off the 15, Mira Mesa Market, Home Depot, and then all the way to Seafood City, and then Mira Mesa Town Center was our focus area 2. So in terms of Mira Mesa Gateway, we had 38% of folks said they preferred community commercial, followed by 24% for community village, and then 38% for urban village. So if you remember, the community commercial was the lease change option, maintaining existing zoning. So overall, you know, we're seeing about 62% of survey participants wanted either community or urban villages, some type of change. So that was the first area. Second focus area, slightly similar, but with community commercial with less, with 36% saying that was their preference, followed by 23% for community village, and then 41% for urban village, which was the maximum change, you know, option. So you can see about 64% show some kind of preference to future villages, more walkable, mixed use, human scale design.
Alex, can I make just a comment on this? You know, we get some correspondence wondering about this kind of odd barbell shaped here where there are fewer for the community village. I think what's happening here is you have two groups of people who are doing this. One group is looking at the looking at the urban village as something positive that is more development. And, you know, the pictures are a lot prettier for the higher density one than for the lower density one.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a group of people who are concerned about the impact of this development. And so they tend to go for the lower, the lower density development. So I don't think we should conclude from this that people don't like the community village. I think it's just that they kind of tend to go to one end or the other. The community village might actually be the kind of the optimum choice here if you take that into account.
Mm-hmm. I was surprised with the survey result too. I thought we'd see more the kind of the middle selection, like community village, would see a higher percentage, but yeah, and I think that will be considered with how we develop the land use scenarios, that, you know, community village will be an option, same with the urban village, for our meeting in January. All right. So moving on to a focus area 3, Sorrento, Mesa. So we had 3 sub areas. Sub area 1 at Barnes Canyon, sub area 2 at Plaza Sorrento or Sorrento Plaza, and then sub area 3 at the intersection of Mira Mesa Boulevard and Pacific Heights. So for Barnes Canyon, we had 36% showing preference for Science and Tech Park. That was the limited residential and more jobs oriented. So keeping it prime. And then for 25% Science and Tech Village, which is a little bit more of a dynamic mix. And then 39% for Science and Tech Hub, which was the most flexibility and a mix of residential with potential employment. So we're seeing
more residential.
What's
more
that?
residential for Science and Tech Hub.
What's that, Justin?
There was more residential for Science and Tech Hub, correct?
Yeah, there was in larger areas. So we're seeing around 64% showing these preferences. In terms of Plaza Sorrento, Sorrento Plaza, this is the intersection of Mira Mesa Boulevard and Camino Santa Fe. We had 47% showing preference for Science and Tech Park, followed by 20% for Science and Tech Village, and then 34% for Science and Tech Hub. So this was the first area where we almost had majority. So we're seeing about 67%, you know, showing preference for this kind of more the Science and Tech Park and Village concepts. And then finally for Pacific Heights Boulevard, again, 45% for Science and Tech Park, followed by Science and Tech Village at 31% and Science and Tech Hub at 24%. And this was I think the least, one of the least preferred option for all the focus areas. So 76% showing preference in these two options. Okay, and finally for Miramar Gateway, we had, so 53% of survey takers preferred kind of more the business park with some residential option, followed by employment village at 14% and flex district at 33%. Next steps. So the team will be using the OCET results to inform the development of land use alternatives, and we'll present the draft land use scenarios to this committee. Usually we have 3, and then we'll prepare and present at the second Planning Commission workshop. So after I present to you, I will go to Planning Commission. They just want to know what's going on, so get their input as well. And then we'll discuss and modify the draft land use scenarios, and then hopefully we can get a recommendation of the preferred land use by this committee. So that's next steps. That's it. I have a lot of supplemental information, which, you know, we could get into or not, but I'll just leave it for discussion right now. And if needed to be, we can go into additional analysis.
Alex,
Yes.
I'm a little amazed at the Sorrento Plaza, given that that is the only Western shopping area for groceries, for various other services, fast food of a variety of sorts. And I don't recall now whether those kinds of amenities for the community were actually described in the options that were there. Do you recall?
Yeah, so I think for the kind of the science and tech park, we did have space for grocery stores and a lot of retail, and there was a plaza. So yeah, it did have a little bit more of a dynamic mix for the area. But I mean, there was a strong consensus there that, you know, people wanted the lowest kind of intensity thresholds in change.
Yes, well, what really called my attention to it were some of the comments, don't take away my Aldi's and things like that, which when Aldi's has a special, because it's very close to where I live, I will perhaps go over there.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a line that was half a block long when the specials were the various Christmas season things, including beer, wine, and cheese for your daily calendar bits.
Yes. So Craig, you know, as I recap, that a lot of these are just conceptual, that, you know, Aldi's going to be there. Long as people support the grocery stores and the business is thriving, it will be there. It just allows for a future option, you know, 20 years from now. If we have a totally different economy, that a type of development or change could be allowed. So, you know, a lot of the options, you know, I've also saw the comment, someone's worried about their church disappearing in Miramar Gateway, and you know, your church is not going anywhere anytime soon. This just provides for an alternative if the property owners or businesses wanted to do something different, or, you know, the economy changes and certain, you know, businesses are no longer viable, and then it gives them an option to try something different. Right now, there is no option for a lot of these properties. So, yeah.
Well, I think, Alex, part of the challenge is communicating to the people. I have another question, which is the IP19 and IP35 individuals. were they consistent? Were they actually arguing for a particular position or particular vision? Or were they just wanting to weight the numbers so that their views would be apparently more significant? And of course, they got caught.
Yes, the answer is yes. The answer was consistent. About 99, I would say 98% is same. So they were trying to influence the outcome in a certain way.
Without sharing their identities, can you share their perspectives of I-19 and
Yeah,
I-45?
and the survey is anonymous, so there is no way, even though we track IP address, but all we know is that it's a Verizon or AT&T, network.
Actually, the answer to that question is actually in the presentation that you mailed to it. It's the following slide past that one. Craig could go back and
We have the slide going over the outlier detection techniques. So there's 3 levels: IP review, timestamps review, and then the patterns review. So I think you were talking about the patterns review, but just going in, you can see here's IP 35 and then IP 19. So I left inclusions threshold at 4 or less. You can see most everyone took the survey once from an IP address. There's larger households. You could see 4 people taking within a household. So that's how it was very obvious about this outlier. And then I conducted a timestamps review. So looking at, all right, when did they take the survey? And, there's first survey for IP 35 was on August 24th, took it once. And then next day, decided to take it 9 times between 9 to 9:45 p.m. So, and it's the same with IP 19. We can see this is the last day of the survey, and they took it 12 times from 3:13 to 4:22. If we had a college dorm with 30 students using the same Wi-Fi, but I believe there isn't one in Mira Mesa. So
You still see different times too.
yeah. And then the third was the patterns review. If the selections were completely different, like all over the place, then you can say, oh, it could be different people taking the survey using the same network. But you see here, it's 35, 100% to 1A1, which is the community commercial, same 100% selection. And then there was a slight variation for Barnes Canyon. So, 32 times for, I think the park, and then 3 times for the village, and then 35 times for, but you can see the pattern here is pretty much consistently the same selection. So based on these 3 methods, we decided to remove 34 of this, input from IP 35, and then same with IP 19. So we allowed for their first survey to be part of the total. So I think that was fair, I hope.
Alex, you've got a couple of comments in the chat here. When is the planning commission date?
Sometime in February. I don't have a date yet. They haven't released their calendar for next year. So
It'll be after our next meeting then?
yeah, it would be after the meeting with this committee.
Okay, the other comment is a long comment. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but it basically is encouraging more more attention to pedestrian safety. I know that's been an issue, but we do have people still getting killed, pedestrians getting killed from time to time. I've got a few comments on the two commercial areas. As I already mentioned, you got that kind of barbell shape for the distribution, and I think what you have is, people who kind of responded to the description of a better landscape, more modern type of development, who picked the highest one, and then you have people who were worried about overdevelopment picking the lower one, and so the point in the middle kind of got left out. But I don't think that means people necessarily preferred 3-2 or 1-2 necessarily. And I would consider all of those when you're doing this. I'm also concerned, as I've mentioned to you, Alex, that the pictures don't really show the scale of the development. The community center development is really a choice between 3 different housing options: one with 400 units, one with 700 units, and one with 1,600 units. The 1,600 units is almost as many as are in Casa Mira View, and then all those units would be in the small area in the Target and shopping center in the Mira Mesa Mall. So, I don't think people looking at this necessarily understood, the scale of the development that was being proposed. There's some other issues also with the way the survey shows things. I'd mentioned to you also in an email that any of the developments demolished the bowling alley and Petco, things which are popular, and of course people who've been trying to preserve. None of them show Little India existing. So it's hard to know what exactly these mean. And the answer I got back from you was, well, that's really at the option of the landowner. But it's hard to perceive then exactly what that means. It looks like the only thing that's really being decided at this point is the number of units. Maybe there will be some guidelines, some amount of park space that has to be added as a function of the number of units or something that's coming, but that's kind of important. On the industrial areas, I'm still concerned about mixing industrial and residential. I'm fine with the Aldi and Pacific Heights ones, but the Barnes Canyon one worries me as far as the future of our industrial developments in Sorrento Mesa. My preference is the number 1, because that is compact and it minimizes the perimeter of the residential area and how close it is to the industrial. I'd like to hear a little more maybe from our industrial members as to whether they agree with that, but in the past, it's been a very significant issue for them having residential too close to their businesses.
Can we look at that one, Alex? I mean, is this the time for us to be really analyzing all these different survey results and weighing in?
Yeah, if you want.
Because are you guys going to run with these? Is that kind of the next step, that you're going to come back with a recommendation based on just the survey?
Yeah, we're going to bring, so we're going to bring the land use scenarios. So you can just think of the land use map as like a 2D. It's just color coded, right? Community village here. What's the density range? What's the FAR? What kind of use? Is it neighborhood commercial, community commercial? And so different types of land uses. Office oriented or R&D office with residential option, etc. So yeah, I think that's when you can start talking about density and intensity, and based on really, I think like Aaron's comment here, right, about pedestrian safety. I think right now Mira Mesa's land use it's all oriented towards cars. I mean, car dependent place. It's very hard to live without automobile in Mira Mesa. And what a lot of the kind of the village concepts show is buildings and public spaces more oriented to people walking, biking, on their wheelchairs, etc. So it's really bringing back a little bit of the balance towards non-auto user of the space. So I think that's what it kind of shows, and that's some of the options that's available right now.
Justin, did you have any comment on the Miramar?
I do. I just have some general comments, and I agree with you with your points, Jeff. I think we have to be really cautious in interpreting these results, given the way they were presented, and what people think they are versus what they truly are. And I feel like there should be real discussion about what it is that people voted on, and it's almost like it needs to be an ongoing discussion, which we've been having with the people that voted. They're not here today, so only some are, but 600 people voted and gave their opinions. It's sort of like you need to have a discussion with those 600 people to make sure they understand what they voted for. And I worry that maybe they don't really know what they voted for entirely. And they basically just went off some pictures and some descriptions as well. I didn't have a chance to review all the comments, but I think those would be telling as well to understand what people really think. And I think that should be part of the process. I'm sure it is for you guys. But I just, my sense is that we should be cautious about moving too fast off of these survey results. I don't know that it represents the true intent of all those that voted. So we should discuss it, and there should be some feedback to those that participated. So that's just my feeling.
Thanks, Justin.
And I'm happy to talk about Miramar. I'd like to go over that and give my input, and I can give my input as far as the other ones are concerned as well, as far as it relates to
Go ahead.
industrial uses versus resident and residential combined. So do you want to talk about Miramar? I mean, is this the time to really go through these things?
I think
Is
we have
that-
to. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let's do Miramar. So can you remind us, Alex, exactly what's in Business Park and Employment
So
Village?
Business Park is a concept where more of the residential would be in the northwest or northeast portion of the area. So
Right.
this is Kearney Villa. So there's already existing apartments
Right.
up here.
It's
There's
Black Mountain. et
yeah,
cetera. Okay.
exactly. And then a little bit more of a mixed use. So activating, so, Little India could have different uses, multi-story, more restaurants and public space with a parking garage concepts. And then mix of business and employment along Miramar Road. And then, going further along in the area.
Will the existing uses be grandfathered in?
Yes, I mean, you were allowed to continue with existing uses.
Okay. And the Employment Village is pretty obvious. And no one voted for that. I'm glad they didn't. I think that one's pretty easy to interpret, especially now, given what's going on with COVID. I mean, it's a game changer. And the Flex district, I understand fully. So, my only concern, of course, is less flexibility with a very fast changing environment. And I've obviously pushed for that for the Flex district. My other concern is how much retail is going to be in these business park areas. And we're talking about smaller format. We're talking about 1,500 square foot spaces, 2,500 square foot spaces, retail spaces, real amenity driven. retail is my guess, that may serve the residential. But you need the residential to frequent the amenities. And to your point, if you want people walking, that's how you're going to do it. So if they can access it from Three Roots and Stone Creek and even Mira Mesa, which I think they should no matter what. I think this entire area should be accessible on foot or on bike, and it should be safely accessible. Then there's something there. But you got to have the right residential density, you know, in the immediate area to serve this retail. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Retail is already suffering mightily, as you guys know. In Miramar, the stuff that's really has survived this downturn or this pandemic is industrial, and the retail is really getting hit hard. And so I would just caution everyone to think in terms of that. I think that people are probably still voting for business park based on what they know and not what's necessarily happening right now, because a lot of these businesses might actually have survived the first or second wave, but they may not survive the third. And I don't know that they'll ever come back. Literally happening as we speak.
So one thing that I think we've been lacking in this whole process is input from the property owners as to what they would actually want to build. So in your case, we actually have that. And I'd really like to get some input from you as to what you want that goes a little beyond, you know, the flex district that kind of unplans the whole thing.
Well, I think the flex space makes more sense, you know, flex district, that you can have business park and flex district. But part of the problem is the most of the residential will not be built west of the Camino Ruiz. So people, they think they are included in that portion of it. So that's why they are asking for the business park rather than a flex district.
Right. So, I mean, you guys know what works there. The planning department is just kind of making this stuff up. So that's why I would like to see something a little better defined from you that might give us a way forward here that works.
Well, you have to have a flex district because you cannot dictate the retail. Retail is changing so fast. And, you know, people, like Justin says, you know, they survived the first storm, second storm, they may not make it, you know. We know some tenants are living because they can't afford to pay rent, they can't even afford to pay utilities.
Yeah, so I agree with Harky, and that's kind of, I know it's not the answer you're looking for, Jeff. I can push it a little bit if you want me to a degree. I can't do the economic analysis and the supply and demand analysis that's necessary, but you know, I can tell you that that this area can only handle so much office, that office is struggling as well. Retail has taken a huge hit. There are very few retailers that are, you know, Amazon, they can, you know, combat the Amazon online effect. And they're mainly kind of these like industrial service guys. It might be the craft guys that are making beer locally or making food locally. It's going to be guys, obviously the auto guys are fine. The big restaurant format that's serving the offices is getting killed. The office space, of course, itself is getting killed. I don't think that that's going to come back ever again in the way that it was there in the first place, you know, unless you have a little more residential density. So the answer to the question is, and that could change. I mean, now we've seen how quickly these things can change given a pandemic, and guys like us, Harky and I, don't like to commit to anything. That's the last thing we want to do. We want to be able to have flexibility to build whatever it needs to be built at the time. These buildings only last for so long, and we want to be able to duck and dive with the times. And I think that in some ways, Miramar it's been too restrictive to allow us to do that. So anytime there's a recession, you scramble to find only the tenants that you can put in those spaces, and they don't exist. And right now, it's these large format retail tenants in the buildings that are not built as industrial buildings. You can't fill them up. You can bring industrial tenants into buildings that are industrial where there was a retail tenant, But if you're talking about those strip centers along Miramar Road, it's pretty tough for them. If they're selling goods that you can buy online, it's game over. So, those centers need to be raised eventually. They need to be torn down and built up, and maybe it's an industrial building that can act as an industrial building and sort of an industrial showroom, and it has some sort of limited uses that allow for residential above it. Maybe it's a 2 to 3 story building, and the folks that live in the area and work in these warehouses, which are really distribution warehouses or service warehouses, there's not a lot of hazardous materials that I know of. I can say in our portfolio, there's very few tenants with hazardous materials. It's often the auto guys. The auto guys, there's I think a fair amount of space for auto use, and I don't think they're going away anytime soon. And I don't think we should get rid of that use. Of course, more and more cars and trucks are going electric, so you're going to have less and less hazardous materials in that regard. I think there's a balance to your point, Jeff, earlier, which is you can't have this industrial with residential. I agree with that to a degree. I think that a lot of people have this perception of what's really happening in Miramar as this industrial place with heavy uses and these toxic materials. And it's true to a degree. And there are guys that do auto body paint, and there's guys that handle some hazardous materials. But, Alex, when you did your analysis, you found that a lot of that stuff in the area that we're looking at now in the IL-2-1 industrial area, hardly anyone has hazardous materials. It's all of these old industrial spaces in these obsolete industrial buildings, which you can't pull big trucks in and out of. And a lot of them have been converted to restaurants or retail uses. And, there's no hazardous material or service. So it's like local distribution of auto parts, maybe. So there's, I don't think it's kind of a black and white thing. I think there could be a little bit of gray, and I haven't had the time, nor do I have the bandwidth. Unfortunately, I wish I did, to really study other cities that have done this, what we're looking at doing, and the transformation of having industrial next to residential, and seeing how they did it, and maybe how they limited some of those industrial uses. Or they give the property owner the option. Look, if you want to bring in auto, you can't have residential, right? You decide. You bring in the residential use, you're precluded from auto. But you leave it up to the property owner and the market to decide what's going to go on that property. And then they may decide, hey, you know what? This residential doesn't work anymore because there's this huge demand for auto use. Well, okay, I'll get rid of the residential. I'll bring in office space where the residential was, and I'm bringing in industrial. But you need to be able to have that kind of flexibility to have the property change with the times. And some of these industrial buildings are very flexible. They can be converted into residential spaces as we speak. In fact, they can be live work. So our one property at Mirilani has a lot of craft guys in it. And I can, speak about a handful of those guys who really struggled initially with this downturn, are still struggling a little bit. But they said to me, hey, Justin, I can't pay my rent for a roof over my head. And I'm thinking they would live in a mezzanine right above their shop at Mirilani. They'd be paying the same rent just for live work, and they would have a much more secure kind of business and residence kind of combination. So right now we can't do live work at Mirilani. I think that would be a perfect example of where you could do it. I know Mirilani's actually been already upzoned for residential, so maybe that's a bad example. But I would see Mirilani as maybe a building where there's 5 or 6 floors, so stick over podium kind of concrete construction. And maybe you have a subterranean garage, but the first level is exactly what's there now, and you have people living above it. It's industrial, but it's not. There's not a single tenant in there that has a hazardous material, unless you consider beer hazardous material, and I don't, but some do.
Justin,
All right.
I'm trying to give you like the gist of what's going on over there, because it's a difficult thing to answer, and I only have some information, but I feel that there's a way to do this. So there's kind of a little bit of a give and take.
Justin?
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful when one tries to present this to the community in the same sense of community that answered this survey, to define what is industrial, because I think you can run the gamut, and there is some dirty industrial, which might be
Yes.
in some people's minds, and then there's very clean industrial.
Mhm.
You know, the most well, the dirtiest thing might be a lathe, and
Yeah,
that's not very dirty.
right. Yep.
And so
Well,
I think Jeff's
hockey will
point,
tell you a lot of the guys are service guys. You know, it could be an HVAC guy or a guy who distributes printer cartridges. I mean, we've got those guys.
There are more people like that, service guys.
Yeah, they're
yes,
not dirty.
Yes, I just want to add to, I know Jeff, you had concern about Barnes Canyon in Sorrento Mesa. But what we're seeing now, as the research that we did, is that now life science industry is moving to downtown. You know, there's a whole plan for a life science district right on the waterfront, right where all the residential towers are. And this is a trend we're seeing in other cities where a lot of the life science R&D tech offices are very compatible with residential. And so I think this goes back to that term industrial is quite outdated for a lot of the businesses that we have in the planning area. So I think, you know, again, looking at that is probably one of the big, you know, challenge in terms of communicating that.
well, I think also, Alex, the point that Justin made about living over the business, that's very common in other parts of the world. And it's not that either the living accommodations or the businesses are in any way adversely impacting the others.
Right.
Yes.
You know, for 2 years, I lived over what they would call a greengrocer, a Sprouts kind of thing. And right next to that was what was called the off license, i.e. Bevmo. And we patronized both of them and were very happy that it was so convenient.
All right. Well, I would encourage you to continue talking, Justin. If you have, you know, input to Alex, you don't have to wait for these meetings. You can do that anytime. I have just one more comment, which was on the Sorrento Plaza area. I was a little surprised that all the options there came out with a bunch of sort of light industrial in it. That's an area that's currently all commercial. It's basically support commercial for the whole western part of the community. It seemed to me like a spot where the kind of thing that you proposed at first for the Mira Mesa shopping centers might actually have worked, where you have, you know, commercial with a higher density of housing rather than putting more industrial type businesses into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you know, the next step is the survey results will help inform, but like obviously we couldn't, you know, come with design for every parcel in the whole planning area. I mean, there will be other areas that will probably propose changes, but this gives us a pretty good guide and direction with the committee's input to start developing the land use alternatives. So yeah, this is just sequence of event. Nothing is pre-baked. I mean, I can see from Miramar Gateway, you know, we have a little bit of combination between the flex idea and the business park idea, you know, that may be reflected in the land use. So,
Well, Alex,
yeah.
might I suggest that the Science and Tech Park, that's fairly understandable, but a business park is not very understandable to me because business is very diverse. And so I think examples would be extremely important. What kinds of businesses would go in or would be expected to go in if there were more residential? And of course, if you phrase it that way, then it becomes fairly obvious. You might want to, and I'll just talk about Sorrento Plaza right now. Okay, there are a couple of nail shop places, hairdressers. There is a liquor store still that's been there for a long time. There's Aldi's. There are some restaurants of a variety of sorts. Those would benefit, I think, from having more residential now. They really depend on the farther north groups, Pacific Ridge and the houses and places along Cali Cristobal. Those are the draws because those are the people I know who go there when I go there anyway.
Yep. So yeah, any proposal for land use, I mean, would make sure to accommodate those uses.
Yes, well, I think that needs though to be exemplified. So when and if we can get more community participation, and particularly the landowners and the business owners that Justin may know, to come and actually talk about what they see as possible. And I think Justin is entirely correct that given first the recession and then followed by the pandemic, a lot of things will never go back to what they once were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there was one other comment in the chat. There's a complaint that there are no options for none of the above in the survey. You did have some 600 comments, and that was made a number of times in there, I think. So just
Is there any way to find out how many comments came from the people who have a business and a property in the Miramar Gateway area?
There's no way to discern.
So I think part of the problem is the people who have a stake in the this thing, they don't have much say so in this one because overriding people are voting in the Mira Mesa area and they just don't want much, keep it the way it is.
Yes.
Yes, that could be true.
So I think you have to listen to more of the people who have a stake in the Miramar area, who has a property, who has a businesses and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
well, Harky,
Yeah.
I think you have
They may not be living within the community area, but they might be having a business and creating jobs.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to keep talking with property owners and business owners, and we have been talking, and I'm sure at our next meeting when we present the land use alternatives, all the business owners and landowners will be at the meeting. So I'm certain of that. So we'll get that discussion, but obviously anything we propose, I mean, has to align with what the direction, and it has to be feasible and encourage.
All right, so we need to close up here pretty quickly. Is there anyone on who didn't get a chance to say something, who wants to say something?
Alex, this is Lil. Are you talking to business owners in Sorrento Valley and the Sorrento Mesa area too?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alex. That was a good discussion. I think we will wrap this up for now. We have a planning group meeting starting in about 5 minutes, so with a different Zoom link. So we will adjourn this meeting now. We'll be back here in January for the next round of the community plan update.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.